My beloved child. There is something unusual about this moment. Not because of what you can see. Not because of what anyone has told you. But because someone, somewhere, has been carrying a memory of you for far longer than you realize. A memory they have never fully shared. A memory they have protected like a precious treasure. And strangely enough, it all goes back to the very first day your paths crossed. Most people believe first meetings are ordinary. A glance. A conversation. A simple moment that disappears into the flow of time. But for this person, that day never disappeared. It remained alive. While seasons changed. While circumstances shifted. While life pulled both of you in different directions. That memory stayed. And now something is changing. Because the secret they have been holding may not stay hidden much longer. You may wonder. What could possibly be so important about the day we first met? The answer is more surprising than you think. Because the secret is not about what happened. It is about what they felt. A feeling they never expected. A realization they never planned for. Something they noticed in a single moment that stayed with them long after everyone else had forgotten the day entirely. They remember details you do not even remember yourself. The way you carried yourself. The expression on your face. The energy you brought into the room. The small things that seemed insignificant at the time. To everyone else, it was just another day. To them, it became a chapter they would replay again and again. And here is the strange part. They never told you. Not then. Not later. Not even when opportunities appeared. Instead, they kept the truth locked away. Partly because they did not know how to explain it. Partly because they feared the moment would lose its magic if spoken aloud. Yet secrets have a curious habit. They become heavier with time. The longer they are carried, the harder they are to hide. And lately, this person has found themselves returning to that memory more often than ever before. Almost as if life itself is reminding them. Almost as if something is urging them to finally speak. There are moments when they catch themselves smiling unexpectedly. Moments when a familiar memory appears out of nowhere. Moments when they realize that what they felt that day never truly disappeared. It simply waited. Quietly. Patiently. For the right moment. And that right moment may be closer than either of you imagine. Because the truth about first meetings is rarely understood while they are happening. Only later do people recognize their significance. Only later do they see how one brief encounter changed the direction of everything that followed. This person sees it now. More clearly than ever. They understand that the day they met you was not ordinary in their story. It was a turning point. A beginning. A moment that left an imprint they could never erase. And as this realization grows stronger, so does the desire to finally reveal what has remained hidden. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Soon. Very soon. Because some secrets are not meant to stay buried forever. Some truths eventually find their voice. And when this one finally surfaces, you may discover that the first day you met meant far more than you ever believed. What they saw. What they felt. What they have never said. That story is closer to being revealed than it has ever been before. And what comes next may change the way you remember that first meeting forever. Something about this story becomes even more remarkable when you understand what happened after that first meeting. Because while you continued living your life, believing that moment had passed like any other, this person was quietly carrying pieces of it with them. Not intentionally at first. Not because they planned to. But because certain memories refused to fade. Have you ever wondered why some moments disappear completely while others remain crystal clear for years? This is one of those moments. For them, the memory never lost its color. In fact, it became sharper. They remember things they never expected to remember. Small details. Tiny fragments. The kind of details people usually forget within days. Yet somehow they remained. And that is where the secret truly begins. Because the memory itself was never the secret. The secret was what happened afterward. The secret was the realization that slowly grew inside them. A realization they resisted. Questioned. Even tried to ignore. At first, they convinced themselves they were imagining things. They told themselves they were reading too much into a simple encounter. They believed time would erase whatever impression had been made. But time did the opposite. Weeks passed. Months passed. And every attempt to dismiss the feeling only seemed to strengthen it. That is when they began asking themselves questions they could not answer. Why did that day still matter? Why did they keep thinking about someone they barely knew? Why did one ordinary encounter feel different from countless others? The answers never came immediately. Instead, they arrived slowly. Like pieces of a puzzle falling into place one by one. And with every piece, the secret grew larger. Because they started realizing that the impact you had on them was not accidental. There was something about your presence that stayed with them. Something difficult to explain. Something even they struggled to understand. The strange thing is that they almost revealed it several times. There were opportunities. Moments when the truth sat right on the edge of being spoken. Moments when a single sentence could have changed everything. Yet each time, they stopped themselves. Not because the feeling wasn't real. But because it felt too important. Too meaningful. Too vulnerable. So they stayed silent. And silence became a habit. A habit that lasted far longer than they ever intended. But silence has limits. Eventually, the truth begins pushing against the walls built around it. Eventually, the heart grows tired of carrying what the voice refuses to say. And lately, that pressure has become impossible for them to ignore. Something is shifting. Something is moving beneath the surface. The memory of that first meeting is no longer just a memory. It has become a reminder. A reminder of words left unspoken. Of feelings left unexplained. Of a truth that has waited patiently for its moment. They may not know exactly how they will reveal it. They may not know exactly when. But they know one thing with certainty. The secret cannot remain hidden forever. Because every time they revisit that first meeting, they realize something new. They realize that what seemed small at the time was actually significant. They realize that what seemed ordinary was quietly extraordinary. And most importantly, they realize that you deserve to know. Not because the secret changes the past. But because it reveals what the past truly meant. The closer they come to this realization, the harder it becomes to stay silent. the harder it becomes to pretend the secret does not exist. And as that wall begins to crack, the truth waits just behind it. A truth connected to the very first moment your paths crossed. A truth that has been growing stronger with every passing day. And when it finally emerges, you may discover that the story of your first meeting was never as simple as it seemed. Because the secret they have carried all this time is much bigger than a memory. It is the reason that memory never left them in the first place. There is another piece of this story that almost nobody sees. The part that happened in complete silence. The part hidden between conversations, busy days, and the passing of time. Because while life appeared normal on the surface, this person kept returning to that first meeting in ways they never expected. Not every day. Not every week. But often enough to realize something important. The memory was not fading. It was growing. Every time they thought they had finally moved beyond it, something would bring it back. A familiar place. A certain song. A random thought appearing without warning. And suddenly they would find themselves standing in that memory again. Seeing the moment as clearly as if it had happened yesterday. That is when they began noticing something unusual. The details they remembered most were not the obvious ones. They were the details nobody else would have paid attention to. The way you reacted to something small. The way your presence changed the atmosphere around you. The way a simple moment somehow felt larger than itself. Those details stayed. And over time, they began forming a picture. A picture this person could no longer ignore. Because the more they reflected on that day, the more they realized the secret was connected to something deeper than a first impression. It was connected to a feeling they had never been able to fully explain. A feeling that followed them long after the meeting ended. At first they thought it would disappear. Then they thought it would weaken. Then they thought life would replace it with new memories. Yet none of those things happened. Instead, the memory remained exactly where it had always been. Quietly waiting. Patiently existing beneath everything else. And recently, something unexpected happened. They stopped asking themselves why they remembered. Instead, they started asking why they had never told you. That question changed everything. Because suddenly the focus was no longer on the past. It was on the future. On what might happen if the truth was finally spoken. On what might happen if the secret was finally released. For the first time, they began imagining that conversation. They imagined explaining what they noticed. They imagined revealing what that day truly meant to them. They imagined sharing something they had kept hidden for far too long. And the more they imagined it, the more natural it began to feel. Almost as if the secret itself was preparing to come into the light. Almost as if the moment for silence was ending. You see, there comes a point when certain truths refuse to stay buried. Not because someone forces them out. But because they become too meaningful to hide. This person is approaching that point. They can feel it. Every reflection brings them closer. Every remembered detail strengthens their certainty. Every passing day makes the secret harder to keep. What makes this even more remarkable is that they are no longer afraid of the truth itself. The only thing they question now is timing. When should they say it? How should they reveal it? What words could possibly capture something they have carried for so long? Those questions remain unanswered. But the decision to remain silent is becoming harder and harder to justify. Because deep down, they know the truth belongs outside the shadows. They know that some stories deserve to be completed. And they know that the story of your first meeting still has an unfinished chapter. A chapter that has never been spoken aloud. A chapter that contains the secret they have protected all this time. The closer they move toward revealing it, the more everything begins to make sense. The memories. The emotions. The unanswered questions. The reason that first meeting never disappeared. Soon, those pieces may finally come together. Soon, the secret may no longer belong only to them. And when that moment arrives, you may discover that the most important part of your first meeting was never what happened that day. It was what stayed in their heart after the day was over. The closer this story moves toward its revelation, the more powerful it becomes. Because there is one detail that has not been spoken yet. One detail that changes the entire meaning of everything you have heard so far. This person did not simply remember the day you met. They compared every encounter that came afterward to that moment. Without realizing it, they used that memory as a reference point. A quiet standard. A moment they measured other experiences against. And somehow, nothing ever felt quite the same. That realization surprised them more than anyone else. Years can pass. People can change. Life can move in unexpected directions. Yet some memories remain untouched by time. This was one of them. The strange part is that they never planned for this to happen. They never woke up one morning and decided to hold on to that first meeting. It happened naturally. Almost invisibly. Like a story being written one page at a time without the author realizing where it is leading. And now, after all this time, they can finally see the pattern. They can finally see why that memory refused to disappear. Because it was never just a memory. It was a message they had not fully understood. A moment carrying meaning that revealed itself slowly over the years. For a long time they ignored that meaning. Then they questioned it. Then they tried to explain it away. But every explanation eventually led back to the same place. Back to you. Back to that first meeting. Back to the secret they never revealed. Recently, something shifted inside them. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But enough to make a difference. Enough to make them realize that some truths lose nothing when shared. In fact, they often become stronger. That realization has changed the way they think. Instead of protecting the secret, they have started imagining what it would feel like to finally release it. And for the first time, that possibility feels real. Not distant. Not impossible. Real. They find themselves replaying conversations that have never happened. Thinking about words they have never spoken. Wondering how you would react if you knew what they had been carrying all this time. Because the truth is surprisingly simple. Yet incredibly powerful. The secret is not hidden because it is complicated. The secret is hidden because it matters. Some things become difficult to say when they mean too much. Some truths grow heavier precisely because they are sincere. And this is one of those truths. Every day that passes seems to bring them closer to understanding that. Closer to realizing that silence has already lasted long enough. Closer to accepting that the story deserves its final chapter. You may not see it happening. You may not hear the thoughts moving through their mind. But something is unfolding. A decision is forming. A wall is weakening. A secret that once felt impossible to reveal is beginning to feel impossible to keep. And when that change reaches its final point, everything may happen faster than expected. Because revelations often arrive quietly before they arrive suddenly. First comes the realization. Then comes the courage. Then comes the moment. The moment when years of silence are replaced by a single conversation. The moment when hidden thoughts finally find words. The moment when the mystery surrounding that first meeting is no longer a mystery at all. This person is closer to that moment than ever before. Closer than they were yesterday. Closer than they were last month. Closer than they have been in a very long time. And when the secret finally emerges, you may discover something astonishing. The day you first met was never ordinary in their eyes. It was the beginning of a story they have been carrying ever since. A story that is now reaching the point where it can no longer stay untold. And what they are preparing to reveal may explain why that first meeting has remained alive in their heart all these years. A moment is coming. Not a dramatic moment. Not a moment announced with signs or certainty. But a quiet moment that has been moving closer with every passing day. The kind of moment that changes everything simply because the truth is finally spoken. This is where the story reaches its final chapter. Because after carrying this secret for so long, this person has begun to understand something important. The memory was never meant to be hidden forever. It was meant to be understood. For years, they looked back at that first meeting and wondered why it stayed with them. Why it remained clear when so many other memories faded. Why it continued to return when they least expected it. Now they finally know. It stayed because it mattered. Not because of a single conversation. Not because of a specific event. But because something genuine began that day. Something meaningful. Something real. And that realization has changed everything. The secret they carried was never about a dramatic discovery. It was about the value they quietly placed on that moment. The significance they saw in it. The way they never stopped remembering what everyone else would have considered ordinary. That is what they may finally reveal. That from the very beginning, the day you met stood apart from every other day. That it became a memory they protected. A memory they revisited. A memory they never truly left behind. And perhaps the greatest surprise of all is this. They are no longer focused on the past. They are focused on what happens when the truth is finally shared. Because some stories are not complete until both people know them. Some memories carry meaning that deserves to be spoken aloud. And some secrets exist only until the right moment arrives. For this person, that moment feels closer than ever. The hesitation is fading. The silence is weakening. The distance between thought and words is becoming smaller. Soon, what has remained hidden may finally become known. Soon, the mystery surrounding that first meeting may finally have an answer. And when it does, you may look back on that day differently. You may realize that while you saw an ordinary beginning, someone else saw something unforgettable. While you continued forward, someone quietly carried the memory with them. While time moved on, the meaning of that day remained. That is the secret. Not a secret built on illusion. Not a secret built on coincidence. A secret built on remembrance. On significance. On the simple fact that one meeting left a lasting mark on a heart that never completely forgot it. And now, after all this time, the truth stands at the edge of being revealed. The story that began with a single meeting is no longer asking to stay hidden. It is asking to be told. And when that final revelation arrives, you may discover that the first day you met was never just the beginning of a memory. It was the beginning of a story that neither time nor distance could erase. The secret has waited long enough. The truth is closer than it has ever been. And somewhere, someone is preparing to finally share what they have carried since the very first day your paths crossed.